We have a very special guest.
Yeah.
Dr. Vedet Coleman-Robinson is the president of the Association of the African American Museums, also known as Triple AM. She is one of my favorite people. I've done some fun work with Triple AM, and Vedet is also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Come on.
How are you? Oh, I love it here.
Oh,
I told her she's already an honorary cousin.
You're
So
an
you're going to
honorary
have to do
cousin,
Vedet
so it's a
Coleman-Robinson
cousin
Reed.
Yes. I'll accept it.
Talk to your husband about that.
Yes.
So doctor, I'm going to get things, Dr. Soror, let me get things started by just asking, we heard this news from the Trump administration to really change the operation of the Smithsonian museums, including what people call the Blacksonian. And there's a lot of concern out there. I know you have been involved with not just what's going on with that museum in DC, but museums across the country, African-American museums across the country. And what's your greatest fear with what Donald Trump is planning to do, to have J.D. Vance kind of oversee it, take away, the ability of the Smithsonian to function as it has independently, and really have the federal government more involved?
Well, number one, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to share this space with you, the two of you. But I have kind of confidence in the Smithsonian's Board of Regents. It's not just J.D. Vance and his cronies that are doing everything. There is balance there. Now, we do see that these people are not playing fair. They are literally the quintessential kids on the playground who have a ball, you're winning. They do not want you to win, so they take their ball and go home, right? So, but I have faith that the Board of Regents is going to do the right thing. What I am concerned about is if there is an order to close any museums, not just ours, but any museum that, and I say ours meaning Black museums and also the Blacksonian. If there is an order to close any of our museums, what happens to that material culture? I feel like we are going to have to, as a people, start storing our treasures in bunkers. So I'm sure there are some defunct military bases. I think Cat Williams just purchased one. So, we may have to lean on our friends to take our treasures and put them underground for a few years until some of this moves over. But that's really my biggest concern. What happens to our material culture when people who are not playing by any rules can just swoop in and take stuff? That is really my biggest thing. Because imagine, Smithsonian and just about all of our museums do have some type of security. But imagine if your governor or mayor is saying that they are not aligned, and please do not, secure this area. What do you do?
Well, sorry, Dr. Vedet. Let's talk about, I remember during January 6th, watching it on TV. I was, working from my home studio and just watching it happen. And the thought that kept coming to my mind was, please don't let these people understand where the Blacksonian is, because I just imagine that if they had realized they were so close to the Black History Museum, they would have ransacked it. That is my presumption. They would have gone through and just started smashing things. And, families all over this country, found these treasures sometimes in their attics and their basements. They were left it by their grandmas. And these are things that they treasured in their own lives, and it's part of their personal history that they then donated to the Blacksonian. I'm friends with Fab Five Freddy. He donated his precious, boom box, and it's not like he had two of them. Like, this is his main artifact from his career. He donated it. Reverend Al donated stuff. Non-famous people donated stuff. There are slave shackles that people held in their families for generations. There are all sorts of treasures in there. And what frightens me, and to your point, and I did I've spoken with some sources around the Blacksonian who really made it clear that the Blacksonian is not the Kennedy Center, right? It's
Yeah.
not directly controlled by the president. There is, as you said, a 17-member board of regents.
Thank the
It's a
Lord.
bipartisan board. Members of Congress are on the board. So you can, go to your member of Congress, and obviously the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the Vice President. So they can't just make radical changes. And I will note for our audience that the vice president did not show up to their quarterly Board of Regents meeting on Monday, so which was interesting.
Thank you for
Yeah,
this.
and that's good. But my question to you is, let's just say that we as a people decided that as much as we love the Blacksonian, we don't trust any government entity to hold on to our treasures anymore. Because at any moment, Donald Trump could say, burn Emmett Till's casket. I don't want that known. Burn down or sell the Montgomery bus boycott bus station, which they've threatened to do. Is there, in your mind, would it be a good idea for us to collect all of those things in a museum like the ones that you run, in a private museum that's not owned and not connected to the government at all?
So my first initial answer, thinking of what the Smithsonian is, I think that we're in good hands like Allstate. But because Allstate is not underwriting this show, I am also going to say, I'm a realist. So I always look at, do we need to take control, right? And I think that if we have to, that's just something that we need to do, right? If you're talking to Vedet the person, so Vedet the person is saying, if we have to start the process of deaccessioning some collections, putting things on loan for a few years at some of the other African American museums from the Smithsonian, not in perpetuity, but at least for the next 4 years. I do think that that's a possibility. It might take a while because, anything that you're doing with the federal government, there is a lot of red tape, but it's not impossible. There are avenues in which items can be on loan. Now, I do know that the Smithsonian does not allow things to be on loan, but that is up to the donors, right? So I don't necessarily, I'm not the avant-garde to answer those questions. Those would be questions that we would need to address with Secretary Lonnie Bunch. But I would say that, yes, I do not see why those things, certain artifacts could not be on loan to our private museums.
So what about funding? I mean, could the federal government freeze funding that, let's say they leave the artifacts alone, the items that are in the museum alone? How much does what they control of the funding that goes to the Smithsonian play into this?
So, they can freeze funding. That's what they're doing now. That's how they're attacking us. So just to give you guys an example, the Institute of Museum and Library Services is less than 1% of the federal budget, right? But they do some really good work for libraries and museums, and they actually, part of their of the National Museum of African American History and Culture's legislation is tied to IMLS. That's their acronym, IMLS, right? So part of that legislation to get that museum up and running, there's a line item that they share, and IMLS is to give money to Black museums and cultural centers, also HBCUs. So anything under the sun that you can think of that has to do with cultural material and, archives and things of that nature, they underwrite that. And same thing with the Latino Museum, that kind of has the same legislation tied to it and things of that nature. So what they did was they just started to put people on admin leave and froze our funds. So we can't get to our funds, AAAM included. We have a couple of cooperative agreements to provide scholarships to our members who, cannot afford to come to our conferences and things of that nature, and also professional development. So internships throughout Black museums are really, funded by IMLS. So those things are frozen. So we can't get to those funds. And then you have members who, because these are federal funds, these are all reimbursable funds. So imagine you spent money because you knew that you had a grant and you're trying to get to your money and there is nothing for you, right? Because you can't get to it and there's nobody there to process. Now, on the flip side, with the National Park Service, National Park Service and a few other agencies, they use an ASAP system. That funding is also frozen. So when you log into ASAP to try to get your money, there's a big block that says there's an error message and you can't get to it. So that is actually impacting the Association of African American Museums, but is also impacting other museums around the country that are dealing with that same thing, right? So when you ask, can they freeze funds? They absolutely can. And they absolutely probably will, because they want to hurt us. They are doing these things to exhaust us, and we will not allow it. We will, dig. I keep telling my board, hey, we ride at dawn. I don't know what dawn it is, and I don't know if we're gonna get shot at 8, but we ride at dawn and we're gonna figure it out, because we just came too far to just come this far, right? So that's not gonna happen. But they are doing things systematically to exhaust us, and we just can't allow that to happen. So when you ask, can they freeze the funds? They already have. I just don't think that right now they have frozen things for Smithsonian. Smithsonian is a little different because they also have a cushion, what I like to call I call it a cushion. They call it the trust. So they have a trust, but they also are federally funded. So they have two things. So whenever there's a furlough, I think that's the best example. Whenever there's a furlough, they still can continue to go for a little bit more because they're not completely, it's quasi-federal.
Okay.
But they get enough federal funding where, they do have federal employees. So, I feel like that is the tactic to get rid of the federal employees so that the work cannot be done by civil servants.
And by the way, you mentioned the National Park Service. I think a lot of people think of a park, they think of a green, grassy park. But,
Yes.
What people don't maybe understand is that a lot of the civil rights, like trails, are national parks. The home that Medgar and Myrlie Evers lived in Jackson, Mississippi, is considered a national park. They sold it to the National Park Service, or granted it to the National Park Service. So that house is a national park. There are some historic churches, including the churches where, the march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge began. Like any of those churches, the churches where the Montgomery bus boycott was planned, is a national park.
Absolutely.
Those parks are being impacted in several ways. As you said, DOGE is putting people on furlough and on administrative leave, forcing these agencies to work with fewer people, to do more work with fewer people, but also telling them they have to stay open. And we've heard anecdotal stories that the park rangers, and they're still considered a park ranger if they're walking you through an historic house or church, are getting harassed by MAGA visitors who are challenging them and demanding that they not tell a true and accurate history of the place that they're at. They want to hear a sanitized, feel good, the whites were never mean history, and they're getting in their faces when they don't do it. How much of that have you heard, and how much stress if you can, to the extent you can, have you heard that National Park Service folks, particularly the Black employees, are under?
Well, I can say, I was at Park Service for 11 years before I was appointed to this position, and it's absolutely disgusting what the public does. I mean, even at our museums, right? And a lot of, let me be clear, a lot of the historic homes that are African American, they are part of our membership. But when I speak to everybody that's a member, the one thing that they say resoundingly when they are on the front lines is there are people who come to our spaces that specifically say, if this were the 1800s, you would be my slave. How do you, as a person who's in 2025, when I took this position 2019, so 2019, I'm trying not to sound like my son, like, you graduated in the late 1900s, mom, so just disrespectful. We can all laugh about that, but it's disrespectful.
Very much so.
But it's things like that. Just hearing as you're trying to do your job, that people want us to slide back into the 1800s or 1860 or 1960. I've been telling everybody just pick a 60 because that's where they're trying to take us. But yeah, so when I speak to members and they tell me that, but for me to hear that is happening at our parks is also disgusting, because it's what's happening is these MAGA supporters are going specifically to parks, right? They used to go to Yellowstone and Sequoia, and name anything that's green. Those used to be their things, but now they really want to come to parks that are tethered to African American history and culture to be disruptive and to basically break people down. And you can't cuss them out because you still have a job. You need to have a job. So I've heard that all over the place from not just our members, but also Park Service folks who are members. And it's a beating down. There was a time prior to this administration that I was thinking about getting grants specifically for our members who are on the front lines, who are being attacked in that way, because it's hard to be in this field. It's absolutely hard to be in this field, and you're inundated by trauma every day when you are interpreting, when you're in the archives and learning and interpreting and preserving, and then you got to get through that, and then you're on the front lines and you're interpreting to the public, and then the public is harassing you. So where do you get your reprieve? So somewhere in there, I got to find a grant for all of that, and that's something else that you guys will not be helping me with that in this conversation, but maybe in a later one we will be discussing. But there are things that our members are dealing with, and Park Service folks are dealing with daily. That are just, it's just heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking thing to know that your fellow Americans, these aren't foreigners, these are your fellow Americans that are treating you like you are subservient.
Yeah. I want to go back to items in these museums, specifically the Blacksonian. What's the relationship like with people who donated? Like, can Fab Five Freddy, can he come and get his boombox? Can people who donate, like, what's the relationship for safekeeping? If the understanding is this could come in and be if I'm him, I'm like, well, if there's a possibility that this could be destroyed, I might want to hold on to that. But what's the relationship like once someone donates something?
Well, once somebody donates an artifact, or let's just stick with that, it becomes part of that collection. So I'm sure that there's a de-accessioning, but then it's also, I would not de-accession it. What I would do is say, well, let's have a conversation about expediting a loan agreement to another Black museum, if you are concerned. There's also
meaning move it, meaning take it from the Blacksonian and put it in a different museum that's private. Gotcha.
Or and nobody wants to hear this, but I'll say it. But this is 2025. Make a 3D copy of it, and make that the thing that's on display. That's low cost to no cost, and put the rest of it in a bunker. That's owned by the federal government, or that would be my thing. I remember the Emmett Till sign, that was continuously being shot at. When I was at the National Park Service, I was in charge of several grants. Most of them were either HBCU, underrepresented communities, African American civil rights, you name it. If it wasn't a marginalized community, Vedet was doing it. Native Americans, I just had to do something that wasn't lily white, and they allowed it. Oh yes, whatever you want to do, you let us know. Well, you'll be the girl. But when I was there, one of my grantees was the Emmett Till sign, because it kept getting shot at. So they made it bulletproof. So the one that is on display down there in Tallahatchie is the one that's bulletproof, that was funded by the National Park Service. But the one that was riddled with bullets has been on tour by the National American History Museum. I think that's the right one. Yes. So it's not the Blacksonian, it's the American History Museum. My thing before it went back was, well, why can't we just make a 3D copy of it, and then that be the thing that stays here, and then the other one goes back to the courthouse? the answer was, I'm sure we could do that, but we don't have the funds right now. We got to move on to the next curated event and things of that nature. We just don't have
Yeah.
the time. But if there is a dedicated, if the public is saying, or a donor is saying, I don't want this on display, but can it be a 3D print, a 3D rendering, an image of an image, a hologram? You know, we were big on holograms when Michael
Mhm.
Jackson passed away. I don't know
Yeah.
why we can't do holograms now. You know, there's
Listen.
all this technology that's out there for people to still have an experience, right? But then we just have to think differently. We just have to
Yeah.
think differently with our Black spaces because we don't always have the money to do it. But I'm sure if we pour in the resources so that there is funding for these renderings and these holograms and things of that nature, it'll get done.
I feel like that could be a great project for HBCUs to
Yes.
create these holographic images or to create, because look, the original costumes from the Wiz are in the Blacksonian. If they mess with that,
Ooh.
we whole ride it gone because it is not acceptable.
And
Like those
Michael's
are the
coming back for that.
original.
Yeah.
Listen, Michael might indeed come back to that and bring Tito and all of them with him. I mean,
Yeah.
and so the reality is that I think that people don't think museums are necessarily, I mean, top of mind until the, you know, Harriet Tubman is erased from the Underground Railroad online, and then people go up in arms, or Jackie Robinson name is taken down from the military websites about war heroes, and then people get up in arms, and we're having to fight these individual battles
Correct.
over individual erasures and fight them one by one. What would be your advice of how we can fight with a broader view instead of having to fight them one off?
Unfortunately, the people that don't like us, my sister calls them clear people. They've been doing an amazing job of making sure that we have been separated since the dawn of time, right? But they did an amazing job post Jim Crow. So to that, I feel that we would have to get with some very great philanthropists. And we would need to start peeling, you know, I had a coffee this morning. I would gladly sacrifice. Now, y'all might not want to deal with me afterwards, but I would gladly sacrifice my coffee daily. Um, I might have to pick up another cup. Who knows? Anyway, you know, I would gladly sacrifice my coffee daily for that type of initiative. I might even take out a loan. I might even take out a loan for my 401k to make sure that something like that can happen. And we just would need to, you know that that person that is helping us, right, is trusted with the funds. But we, you know, in mass need to do something like that because they're coming at us in different areas and different ways. Like I would have never thought that I was going to wake up or right before I went to bed on Sunday evening and hear that Harriet Tubman, the conductor of the Underground Railroad, was not going to be, you know, part of the interpretation for the. I don't know how you do it. I just don't know how you do it. So all of our energy went to making sure that she comes back. But if we had a collective effort to say that every time there is something that's being jeopardized, we could just throw money at it. Like I think about those Confederate statues that all came down, right? Right before COVID or during COVID. Yeah, we would need to start giving money to the Black History Museum and Cultural Center in Richmond to make sure that those things remain in a graveyard. That's just it. But there are several instances like that throughout the country that we need to give our funding to.
Mhm.
So I think I think it's high time for us to put our money where our mouths are because you know, Jackie and Joy, for so long, people were telling us that our history didn't matter. So
Mhm.
that's why we're just catching up for people to see us. And that's why it took so long for there to be a Blacksonian. You know, we had the Anacostia Community Museum, but it wasn't on the mall. And I thank John Kennard for, you know, establishing that museum because it was something that needed to be done. But also the need was to have something on the mall, and AAAM's members made sure through advocacy work that we did it. So we're just going to have to continue to advocate as a people.
And I
Amen.
think it's important that we not just focus solely on the Blacksonian, but also, you know, with your organization supporting African American museums across the country, and really underlining the importance of all museums that are doing this work, and what can we do to support that effort as well.
Thank you. That's very important because not only are we supporting our Black museums, but we have several HBCUs that are part of AAAM, and they're not just part of AAAM because of the fact that they have a museum on site, but it's also their archives. So we've been having a lot of archivists coming to AAAM about, what do I need to do? How can I get learned up? All the things, because now we're bringing in a new generation of folks who are, amazing, but they want digital stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Clutch my pearls that don't exist on me right now today, but that was so taboo like 20 years ago, talking about digitizing and archives, but that's where we are now. People want things at their fingertips. So Jackie, to your point, the best thing to do is definitely to donate to those museums. I was thinking about like, well, what could we do? Well, we could have like AAAM days where we're just going around and picking up a state in which everybody donates to those museums in that state, or just make sure that everybody purchases a ticket, whether you go or not. Think about all the things that we've signed up for and purchased, and then you're like, girl, I don't feel like going to that thing today. Well, do it to our Black museums, and it's all about tourism as well. Like the economic impact that Black museums have on a city is ridiculous. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Well, and I mean, in cities like Memphis, when people go to the Lorraine Motel, which is a museum, that injects very necessary money into a relatively impoverished community. And so, I think that is part of it too, right? Like we may need to start making our vacations like those Black history trails and starting to put actual coins in the, in the can. How can people support the AAAM directly? And tell us more about the work that you all do.
So the Association of African American Museums was established about almost 50 years ago. We're about to hit 50. And we were established out of the Black arts movement because people were telling us that our stuff did not matter, right? Black people stuff, who needs that? So, our founders were just like, well, we're going to do our own thing like we normally do. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to, do all of the preservation, but it was also about iron sharpening iron. How can John Kennard was one of our founding members, along with Dr. Burroughs, Margaret Burroughs, and Charles Wright from the Wright Museum and the DuSable Museum. So for those people who don't know, I have to say that because that's my job and I'm trying to keep it. But John Kennard was part of the Smithsonian. So when they will all come together at these convenings, it was iron sharpening iron. So we still have that as part of our fabric for AAAM. During our annual meetings, all of our members just convene and have a conversation about what is the plight of Black museums. It's kind of still the same. It's all about funding and resources, but it's pivoted a little bit more to also security. So what does it look like when you come to work and there's a note that says, we're going to bomb you? Whoa, wait a minute, I just came to work. Or if there's a noose or something like that. So we have those kinds of discussions as well. As far as supporting AAAM, you can always become a member. We're about to start a membership that's similar to becoming an affiliate member, where if you're not part of this organization or part of this field, you can still be a supporter. So that's one. And then also just donating to us, because we are ramping up advocacy in a different type of way than when we started. Before, it was, just making sure that Black museums had the knowledge to do things. But now it's, look, y'all, there's an attack on us, right? So what are we going to do to make sure that everybody is safe and secure? Also, something that I'm hearing, and I'll just say this because you all gave me the floor. You shouldn't have done it. But, I think about our members suffered during just this past Black History Month. I heard that a few of them told me that their Black History Month bookings were down 80% because that DEI rolled out right around there. The EO about DEI and coming into museums and having the students come and learn about Black history, those things were down, as well as booking the space. So the one thing that Black museums have is space. So please book it for your Jack and Jill meetings, for your sorority meetings, just because if you got a church and you want to have something not at the church all the time, book it at the nonprofit museum down the street. Our museums have always been community centers and doubled up as serving the community. So allow them to do that for you during this time. So it's real. We are going to need to make sure that our dollars stay our dollars. You know, Target found out, but allow our museums.
No, I love that.
Target money at the museums. How about that?
There you have it. I would love it. And museums would love it too.
I think that those are all great ideas. Love that, because the museums are often just such beautiful spaces to hold events in, but also having a membership, you know, or buying a ticket. And you don't even have to go. You can buy a ticket in another city. You don't even have to go. Well, Dr. Vedet Coleman, soror doctor, Vedet Coleman-Robinson. I know. Thank you so much for joining us and breaking it down for us. You'll have to come back because this conversation we know is not over. There'll be a lot more to discuss. So thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And is it all right to call it the Blacksonian? I read somewhere that Lonnie Smith does not like that nickname.
Lonnie does not like it. But that is not, you know, I can't stop people from saying, as long as it's not derogatory.
Yes, he don't do. He can't stop the nation. The Blacks have voted, Lonnie Bunch. The Blacks have voted.
Listen, that brother's from Jersey, just like I am, and y'all ain't about to get me cut. I love him to death. Lonnie, I didn't say it, they did. But you know, a t-shirt never hurts.
Let's get him a t-shirt. My husband and I had dinner once with Lonnie Bunch and his wife. They're lovely people, and so we are very sorry, Dr. Bunch, and we don't mean nothing by it, but we still gonna call it the Blacksonian, my good friend. That's gonna happen.
Black people have spoken, but I'll let
the Blacks have spoken.
Black people have spoken. All right, Vedet. Thank you so much, soror. We appreciate you.
I appreciate you guys. Whenever you need me. Bye. Love you.
Bye. Love you. The Blacks voted, and it's unanimous. It's the Blacksonian. Like it or not, Lonnie Bunch.
Girl, everybody calls it the Blacksonian. I'm like, what are you gonna do?
They call it NAMIC, and whenever people call it NAMIC, you have to. See, I'm very against. What is it? Not anagrams. Against
acronyms.
Acronyms. I'm just not for them, because the thing is, people say acronyms as if everybody knows what they mean. Like people will be like the
DEI.
FDA or DEI.
Yeah.
DEI is one of the ones that to me is the most important to say it all the way out, because it's easy to demonize something when you don't have to be specific. When somebody says DEI, I want you to spell that out, because I want you to tell me that you oppose diversity, equity, and inclusion. Don't say DEI, because you kind of let yourself off the hook. I want you to know, I want you to say what DEI stands for. And the same thing like saying, well, they're cutting the FDA. That makes it easy to cut the FDA, because people go, well, what's that? It's the Food and Drug Administration. Do you want them to cut the thing that regulates your food and your drugs? Like the CDC. Well, what's that? The Centers for Disease Control. I like when you spell it out, because it really lets people know what they're losing. If you just say a bunch of letters, it doesn't mean anything to most people.
Yeah. People still get mad when you say NAACP, and they're like, colored people. We still saying colored people? Y'all don't want to change that?
And the thing is,
the NAACP is like, don't say the whole thing.
Listen, that's why LDF, so we just LDF. Because they used to be the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. They said, we just LDF, honey.
Separate now. They've been separate for a long time.
They said the color got to go.
We ain't doing that.
I think that was under Sherilyn. Sherilyn probably said colored.
Sherilyn don't play.